Well, your injury made me wake up and just think, I want to talk to you. I want to know what's in your mind, what's in your soul, what's in your dreaming, what's going on. I just wanted to know. And I felt like perhaps I might have something to offer, you know, that could perhaps be medicinal or helpful or insightful or something. But that was just, if it actually turned out to happen, which often happens for me, is like when we first spoke, I just had these cascades of insight about things that had been bubbling in me for a long time that I felt were catalyzed by you. And that's still going on. I mean, our first conversation tore me a new one or three.
That's I've been listening to more of your content recently, and I was like, oh, that's why. Um, and I we haven't really we've kind of touched on some of these things, but we haven't directly. But the people you surround yourself with are all touching on these things. And I'm like, it makes sense then that I would be pulled into this net. Um, for
Mm.
example, one of my main teachers is has studied a lot of the Toltec teachings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of dreaming comes and goes. It's active, it's not active. For me, it comes in different waves of trying to be more active. Um,
Mm.
but the I just want to touch on this because I'm trying to feed into it. The third mind that you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
uh, I don't have any particular insights about that. I just want to acknowledge that. Um, I'm starting to understand more, and this is because of my injury. It is because of my isolation. I'm not isolated. I go to therapy every day, but I'm isolated in the sense of I'm not going to work. I'm not part of the machine anymore, which
Mm.
takes away other motivations and desperations. Um, so there's things that have been percolating and driving me to explore for years and years and years and years. And I've never got off that, but sometimes I can't go as strongly into that as I want to. And recently I've been trying to go into that more strongly. And um, it's helping me see that perhaps that third mind I inhabit more frequently and I am aware of it. Um, that's as far as I know how to go with that one.
Mm. I mean, language isn't necessarily important. That's like my toy phrase for something that I've discovered that I think we can do together that's natural to humans. And for some reason, we're not really given the opportunity to think and speak openly about this. No one, we are, I mean, I'm going to lecture a little bit here. We are trained and scripted to think that my mind is separate from yours
Right.
and that we can get together or whatever, but that when we do get together, our mind stays separate in this little bubble called Darren.
Right.
And I think that's actually completely fucking backwards. I think minds are made for the third mind experience, communal consciousness, communal awareness, communal intelligence, communal adventure, healing, memory, anamnesis, recognition, resurrection, all these things. And this separate thing, this whole idea of like separate minds is actually a bad disease. It's
Right.
a bad disease. Like, and I also came to recently suspect that thinking is entirely the wrong thing, that minds are not for thinking. Minds are not for thinking in the same way that fish are not for crawling.
I would agree. I would deeply, deeply agree with all of that. And that is what this new experiment in my life is giving me the freedom to explore more intentionally. Um, so, okay. So that's actually why I wanted to talk to you,
Mm.
because of some of the dreamings that I've had recently.
Oh, cool.
So, and there was one I had recently where I was like, I have to tell him about that.
Great.
Um, so this experiment, I've always been in and out of playing with dreaming. Um, I quit. Well, I actually was getting pretty, I was doing the whole like trying to follow the Toltec path as much as I could. I don't really like Castaneda's writings. But that just happens to be the people that I kind of got pulled in with. And I was trying to become more lucid in my dreams, which, by the way, so I have seen something similar to the sun in my dreams.
Hmm.
But the second that I saw it, I became lucid and realized I could control it and started
Wow.
playing around with the light in my dream. Like
Wow.
immediately, I was like, "Oh my god, I can change the light." So it wasn't. It's like it was starting to come up over the horizon, and immediately I was like, "Oh, I can change this," and started playing with it. So it went more to the light than the sun, and that's the only time I can ever remember seeing the sun in my dreams. Uh,
Wow.
but that's separate. So I kind of got away from my dreaming, the beginning stages of my accident. So the first time we talked, you mentioned the separation from the cosmos, and it got to me. And so I decided to study astrology. So, of course, my immediate inclination through studying astrology is my particular teacher. Um, it's not about reading, it's about dreaming with the planets. So the course starts for me, my training is trying to track the moon and dream with the moon and see what comes up through dreaming. Um, Absolutely nothing about astrology has come up with dreaming at all.
Hmm.
However, once again, it puts me back in that place where I'm working with dreams again. So here I am again. And I give up. Like this is where I'm staying. I get it. But
Hmm.
what I started doing is reality testing my dreams. Because the very first, I told you about the first experience I had with the paralyzed person that lives in Australia, and the last time we talked. And that dream checked out. he knew what I was talking about. And I was like, okay, well, something's telling me I should just keep reality testing this. So every single time I've had a dream with an individual that I recognize in it, I
Mm,
reach out to that individual.
mm.
8 times out of 10, um, there's a correlation. Not every time, but extremely high percentage of times, there's a very high correlation.
Mm.
Um, to the point where it is kind of bothersome. It does disturb me a little bit because I have no way of telling what's mine and what's theirs in the dream. So
Right.
it seems like it's just Amber stuff. It's not. It's not, but it all feels the same. It has the same texture. It has the same essence within me. But I'm definitely picking up on things that I shouldn't be able to pick up on from other people.
Yeah, I love that phrase, shouldn't be able to pick up on.
Right, right, right,
Beautiful.
right.
According to what?
I know, I
Right.
know.
Who's the authority that figure?
Right,
Who wrote the book of Supposta? Tony and Johnny Supposta of Brooklyn, New York. They wrote the book of Supposta. You're not supposed to be able to pick up on that stuff.
right,
If you're actually separate, which is the reigning dominant myth, right? We think our minds are separate. We think our lives are separate. We think, well, I'm only responsible for my stuff, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead. I'm with
right. So on a separate note,
you.
that's also been very exciting to me. It's all of these things that I've been exploring and investigating for years and years. It's all starting to come together, and I'm like, okay, this is what's happening. Like this is why I'm probably in this position, because I might not have been brave enough to go forth with some of these explorations. But I also started taking a course, a meditation teacher training,
Mm,
which um as soon as I got injured, because I was like, well, I have, what am I going to do? Like,
sure.
I need to do something. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and unbeknownst to me, so this particular method, it's not about meditating. Like, it's not going to be that deep intensive meditation where you're trying to discover unity consciousness or the clear light. It's very much the system that they're pushing out into the world is very much about realizing that we are all interconnected, and that if you are responsible for your stuff, it helps me out.
Mm,
So it's
okay.
just about becoming more aware of your own internal nervous system and how that's interacting with the social nervous system,
Okay.
which I've always felt to be true. I just didn't know how to articulate that in a way that didn't sound woo to people.
Yeah, and you're not supposed to sound woo, by the way. Right.
So I'm handed this methodology and I'm like, oh, wow, this is great. So I'm doing that in my spare time right now. And it's um, exciting because as I pay attention to the dreaming stuff, I'm like, I'm going to tie these two together eventually. I just don't know what that looks like yet. The dream I wanted to tell you about. So I was listening to a podcast, and I've never heard this podcast before. It just was one of those random, like, hey, you should listen to this. Um, Science and Non-Duality, SANS. And the guest was, I think her name is Manda Scott. She is a she is an author. She also practices, she doesn't like to call it shamanic dreaming, because in her opinion, the particular culture she comes from can't really say they practice shamanism. Um, But I was listening to this podcast and I liked where she was kind of going. I liked her vibe, but I didn't get any details, deep details about her, or the book she was writing. I no more information. And I went to bed that night and I since I've been trying to educate I've been trying to ask my dreaming body about how I should be moving forward with my education.
Hmm.
Um, and trying, instead of having my thinking mind decide this is what my next steps are going to be, I'm trying to nurture what should my next step be. So I went to bed and I asked, as I do, please, what should my next steps be? What should I be doing? And I had a dream, and of course, it wasn't mystical, it wasn't magical, but there's this guy, and the essence, the quality of this guy in this dream was, I he's looking at me and going, "You are mine." Like, not in a caveman way that people are going to
Hmm.
assume. And I say that a very much
Hmm.
like a proud ownership.
Hmm.
Um, and in this dream, there's silly things like I'm looking for a new apartment, like I'm going to a car wash, whatever. Like, nothing
Hmm.
magical. So at some point, he hands me a brooch, a gift, which now I'm like, oh, you should probably pay attention to gifts and dreams. And as he hands me this brooch, I'm kind of looking at it. And the thing that he goes and he sticks it through my cheek,
Which
and so
side?
my right side.
Okay.
And so I was kind of like, ugh, like he goes to hand me another one, and I was like, no, I'm good, thank you, I appreciate it, but I don't really like how that stuck me. And I woke
Hmm.
up and I wrote this down, and I decide that next morning, I'm like, I'm gonna look up this lady. I'm gonna see what she's about. I'm gonna see what kind of dreaming she's teaching. What is this? And as I sign up for her newsletter, she just finished a new book. And so when you sign up for the newsletter, you get a copy of the first chapter. And that book is called Dreaming with the Amber Hair. So I was like, okay, I'm going to read this. And the story starts out, there's this character and she's going down to the water to dream, and she has a brooch in her hand.
Hmm.
And the whole beginning part of the story is about how she comes to receive this brooch.
Hmm.
And in the story, something happens, and a character that knows how to dream in the story recognizes that something much further down in the lineage is going to happen, and she needs to intervene. And her point in intervention happens at the time that the brooch is given. And so it becomes this item of memory that gets passed down generation to generation to generation.
Hmm.
And so this woman's going to dream with the brooch so she can figure out why she has been given it. And as she does, this god like character, that's how she describes it, because she's assuming it's a god, it's a spirit, she doesn't know yet, comes to her and she asks it, "What would you have me do?" And so I'm just going to read the response.
Hmm.
Um, it says, So she's asking, what would you have me do? She says, their children's children's children will not stand at the last line between humanity and oblivion, calling the old gods back to the healing of the world. He waits, him being the spirit. She says, I didn't call you back, you came. And he said, you sat by the scrying lock on the night and held the sun brooch in memory of your grandmother. She said, I didn't know what I was doing. I certainly wasn't calling you. And she says, if I understand, there's another, the conversation kind of goes on.
Hmm.
Um, she said, if I understand you correctly, now that I know how, I could choose to call back the old gods to be the healing of the world. She says, how exactly would that be different? He says, intent is everything. When this night began, you had no clear intent. So, getting back to the question of what should I do? What would you have me do? I don't see how the world can be healed short of removing all the people. And he said, all it takes is for you to care more than oneself, really to care. The sun is rising. He may be of the sun, but he is fading. And she said, I don't think I said that aloud. Even so, she says, all it takes is for most of us to care more for the world. Um, and after I read that, I realized that was the answer. So I went to bed that night going, what would you have me do? I was handed this brooch in my dream. I woke up the next morning and read this story about how this character was given this brooch. And the answer essentially was, you need to care about the world more than you care about yourself.
Hmm.
That's it.
It struck me uh, even before you were telling this story, and I just want to circle back to this so that I don't lose track of it. The riddle, koan, if you will, which is not a riddle. A koan's not a riddle. It's a sort of like a, what is it? It's a grinding stone for the meditative mind in Zen, a koan, right? Sort of grind your mind against it, and eventually, hopefully, there's some kind of opening takes place. But the riddle written beneath your tattoo has plagued me since first I heard of it. And it struck me this afternoon as we were talking. You actually implied, even though perhaps you didn't say directly, that the question written there isn't actually the question. Um, and I don't claim to know what the question is, but from above the ordinary human perspective, it would be immediately clear that your mind is actually located in all the minds that aren't yours.
Right. I, listening to that conversation again today, and I heard myself describing the intention behind getting the tattoo and where it came from to you,
Mm.
and hearing myself from as a third person that's not experiencing me, I was like, wow, that's really obvious. It's really obvious where that message is coming from. Um, because I said I was sending myself a message going, don't forget me.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's really beautiful.
I thought I was sending future Amber that message. No, I
Mm.
was receiving that message.
Mm.
Much more obvious and clear if you're hearing it as, an outside
Right.
party.
Yeah, yeah. This is one of the beautiful things about these conversations and occasionally recording them, right? Because then we can have the perspective from outside where we were in the moment in the conversation and so forth. Um, yeah, the secret. Yeah, dare I say this? Yes, I dare. My name is Darren. But the secret of the third mind is it's not the third mind, it's the first mind.
Right,
This is the third
right,
mind.
right,
This
right.
one's like, 3 steps down the confusion ladder. The
Yes.
first mind is actually the one we have together, and the weird one is the one that we suppose we have in isolation or apart.
Right.
And by the way, you were making fun of some of the stuff in your dreams. You weren't actually making fun of it, but you were I mean, I don't have to use severe language. You were making less of two things that you specifically mentioned, and one of them was looking for a new apartment, a new apartment,
Right, right.
and the other one had to do with the car wash. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and I've been getting a very nice, new, snazzy car in a lot of my dreams frequently.
Oh yeah, but you haven't yet gotten the walking experience, have you? Or have you?
Um, I am moving through my dreams. So when I'm experiencing my dreams, it's always through, I'm never watching myself.
Right,
It's eyes.
right.
Uh, I was flying last night
Okay.
in a contraption though.
Mm.
So I am moving. I haven't checked in on how I'm moving yet.
Fair enough. Yeah, I copy.
So I'm not having, there was time periods where I was moving awkwardly and I was very aware of it.
Mm. Mhm.
Or I would go to stand in my dream and I would be like, oh, that's right. I don't know how to do that. And then I would like fall. I'm not having those experiences. But I am getting around. So, but yes, I thought about that today with the new car. I was like, oh, that's interesting. All right.
Yeah, but also like a car wash is particularly redolent of metaphoric meaning, and a new apartment. Both
Yeah.
of those, like they might seem really ordinary superficially, but that's just because the waking mind doesn't see them as sort of metaphysical, redolent of metaphysical, profundity. And yet the dreaming mind does pick things,
Mm,
or it doesn't actually, I'm not even sure if pick is the right word. It selectively enhances the possibility space in a meaningful way, is what I would say. Um, God, what else was I going to say? Yes, without being too specific, uh, in my dreaming, I am aware in my dreams of certain limitations
mhm.
that are native to my waking experience, put it that way.
Right.
And so sometimes in my dreams, there are things I will either resist doing or I will tell myself, oh, you can't do that because
Right.
of some limitation that I am aware of in the waking world. Um, Flying in a contraption, the brooch through the right cheek. Right cheek piercing. Was it curved? Was it like a hook? Because it sounds
No,
when you're okay.
no, it was straight. But I took it away to, for me, I took it to mean remember this, because it would have been a detail that I might not even particularly remembered, but the next morning as I was reading that, I and this character immediately is given this brooch and it's like, this is important, dream with this. And I was like, oh my God, my dream last night. Like, I think if I had just been handed it, it might have disappeared. But the fact that it was pierced through my skin was like, you're gonna remember this.
So, I mean, how familiar are you with the concept of we don't actually have a word for this in English? And by the way, oh, yeah, there's some circling back I want to do to a couple of things. Um, so since we don't have a word, I'm going to resist the urge to call it a fetish. But are you familiar with the very ancient practice of using objects to dream with, like sleeping with a specific object under the pillow or very near to you, particularly a sacred object or
Yes.
something that's particularly meaningful to you?
Yeah.
So those things, I don't know what to call them. We could call them dream foci, or we could call them amulets. There's different things we could call them. I don't think it's important what we call them. I think it's important that it's like what was said in the writing. This thing that is referred to as intent.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean what is your plan. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It in dreaming practices and in traditions that I've become familiar with from indigenous peoples, this word could be translated various ways. In Castanedian tradition, the word impeccability is often used. But one of my other close friends, who's a shamanic practitioner of many decades, used the phrase ruthlessness. And what she meant wasn't um, tear things up and kill them. She meant exclude all features of thought, concern, evaluation, suspicion, prediction, probabilistic thinking, exclude all of those things and be absolutely focused on the action at hand without reserve, unreservedly focused on the action at hand. So that's what she, I think, meant by ruthlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And that's often what is meant by this word intent in this context. It can mean your goal, but mostly it means the way you exclude obstacles. You don't even consider obstacles. They are
Right.
no part of what is going on. Yeah.
That's how I understand it
Mm.
energetically.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm still delusional.
Uh-huh. Well, um, I guess we think we know how we're supposed to be.
Right.
I'd love to know what it is we're using to make that determination. What's the what's the metric? What kind of, ruler are we measuring with? And why would we trust it? Because that ruler is the ruler of a disimpersoned being. It's pure measurement. There's no heart there. There's no lungs. There's no pancreas. There's no spleen, no bladder, no digestive stuff. no, liver, no kidneys. It's just measurements on a stick. So it has some use, but I don't trust it about deep things.
I don't anymore, which is why I appreciate being able to explore this, because I'm growing in confidence, um, this thing that I have wanted to explore with other people. I'm growing in confidence that it's okay for me to explore that. Um, in fact, I am supposed to explore that because if you look at the deep sickness that is happening right now, it's the same. It comes from people not being aware of that mind. Um, I think that's why when I read that, um, when that character was saying you just have to care about more than yourself, immediately I was like, oh, duh. Like, this is all me.
Yeah.
And as soon as I put myself there, I'm no longer alone. I'm no longer separate. All of the crying lonely angel that's saying, "Where is my mind?" doesn't feel that anymore. Um, and when I listen to other people talk, um, listening to music on the way to rehab today, I hear the same story coming out of everybody, and that's where the sickness is. So I feel more compelled to begin coming out about these things that I've been exploring, and keeping to myself, and
Hmm.
which I think is also why I was like, I have to tell him about that dream because that message to me is very important.
Is the amber hair a bunny?
It is.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, there's something about rabbits and dreaming.
I did see one the next morning too, which I kind of knew that was going to happen, but
Huh.
it's like, oh, there it is. Yet to see when I'm dreaming, and I'm sure there is. I'm sure that's what the book is about. I don't know what the book's about yet, but obviously, I mean, but I know, but the author admits she is part of her mission is, um she believes dreaming a path to that world, where we are taking care of the world as if it is an extension of ourselves, which it is, and that should be obvious, but um, it's not for a lot of people. So she recognizes being an author, and she's also studied how language affects the mind. If she can create that bridge using language, you know, um, so that's what the book series is about. And, it
Hmm.
worked, obviously. But what was more intriguing to me is how just I didn't know that yet, but I managed to tune into her intention and dreaming the night before.
Another one of the weird ways it seems to me that we become confused and alone has to do with time.
Mm. Yes, perhaps that is what I wanted to explore with you. Uh, because you have talked about the separation and why is that? Why is that there? How did that get there? Why are we?
Yeah, I mean, the history of that mystery is rich and profuse with strange novelty and cascades of crisis.
Do you have your suspicions?
Many.
Okay.
I have a whole library of those. But I'm happy to explore rather than just, whip out my books.
Um, I don't have any inclinations. However, time, an experience I had recently, I communicated this experience to you as well. So oftentimes, I go out and I try to sit in the sun around 12, and there's a species of lizard that this is the first time I've ever seen it where I live. Very beautiful. It has a bright blue belly.
That's where you're going. I know. Yeah.
And I've never it's not a skink. It's not a
Nope. It's
tail.
actually a blue belly lizard.
Yep.
Hmm.
And I've never seen them before. They're just gorgeous and I love watching them.
Hmm.
And you know, if you're someone that spends time outside with animals, some people think, oh, lizards, there's if you live in Florida, there's hundreds of them and they're different. But no, this is the same lizard. I see him every day.
Hmm.
Does the same whatever.
Hmm. Yeah.
Then one
Animals
day,
have animals have daily routines. Let's be clear
yeah,
about this. Yeah.
absolutely.
Hmm.
It's mind blowing to me that people would think otherwise. Like there's a family of cranes that go by at 12:30 every day. Like
Yep.
that's but one day I went out and the adult male lizard was not there. But there was a young lizard now there of the same species. And thinking about time, instead of looking at that situation as if it was something that happened in a linear aspect of time, where there was an adult and then there was a baby, like for some reason, something in me was like, that's the same lizard.
Mhm.
This is just the same moment happening again, just refreshed. And something about that experience felt ancient to me, where it's not where somebody that lived in that kind of time felt these beings being renewed and not dying.
Mhm.
This awareness, I was watching a documentary once. I forget what it's called. It's the one where the guy goes and makes friends with an octopus.
My
Have you
octopus teacher.
Yeah. Oh, this is one of those things where if anyone's listening to this and they haven't seen it, I'm going to spoil something. So maybe don't listen
Yeah,
until,
plug your ears
yeah,
until you wave your hand.
yeah, thank you. So as you're watching the documentary and he makes there's things that happen where there's mannerisms that these two share because they've gotten into relationship,
Mhm.
and then this octopus dies, and something in me knew it was like it's going to have babies and those babies are going to know this man, and it's not, and that's exactly what happened, and he was surprised But to me, it was like, no, that's what reincarnation is. But to me, it also changes the relationship to time. It doesn't become linear at that point. It just becomes renewal. And I don't have a different word for that because language exists within time.
Hmm. Okay, so there's a bunch of threads here.
So I'm waving my hand.
Yeah, yeah. There's a bunch of threads here that I think are important, and they have to do with the dominant paradigms of delusional separateness
Mhm.
that are imposed on us by our culture, um, the language users we encounter, and how they treat identity, and how they treat sequence, and how they treat causality. And those treatments become instructions that we learn to obey in consciousness and in evaluation. In other words, there's 10 billion things per second going on. We excerpt a specific array of features of those things, which are then emphasized in consciousness. This is called excerption. And rather than clearly understanding that we are making derivations over a manifold, we pretend that we are seeing what's going on, quote unquote, we're seeing what's going on.
Right.
And we're also figuring out what and who did what when, caused what thing, and who's responsible, whose obligation is it. And, when we go to court, we're going to know what happened here because this thing happened and that thing happened, and on and on and on. We have a crappy second mind that's based on a lot of bullshit stuff that not only isn't true, it is impossible. There's no fucking chance that shit could be true. And we treat it like it's a fork, like it's the most absolutely reliable thing you could hold in your hand. You know exactly what's going on. And there's so many things I want to talk about here, but I'll try to remain coherent. One problem there are okay. There's a two-layered situation in being human. And I'm going to argue that the bottommost layer in this toy of it, this is just a toy, orbits three principles: vigilance, ambiguity, and prediction. Vigilance is what we're paying attention to and why, and threats tend to get the most attention. Ambiguity is the unknown. That's mystery. We don't know what that is. Unknownness raises vigilance. Okay. The more unknownness there is, the higher vigilance tends to go. And when vigilance goes pretty high, we start becoming insane. Right? We can't bear a high vigilance burden for very long, most of us. And the reason that we're relating with what vigilance and ambiguity are doing in this loop is they're making predictions about the future or about identity. Right? Okay, so we got this VAP thing. But then above that, we have this other thing that I'm going to call, what am I going to call it? I'm going to call it the amphitheater. And the amphitheater contains familiar roles: the role of victim, perpetrator, rescuer, judge, spectator, comedian, lover, child, mother, father, right? But mainly the roles that we tend to play are victim, persecutor, rescuer, judge, spectator, like commentator, right? And those roles are really familiar to us, so we know how they work out. And when we know how a role works out, that reduces ambiguity, which reduces the vigilance burden. So
Right.
we are happy to trade our freedom for a familiar role that we know how it works. And the reason we are happy to trade the freedom away, one could argue, no, I'm not going to make that statement about myself, but we are often willing to trade away most of our freedom for the security of knowing how something works. And the reason that I think this language is very tricky. I don't mean the reason. The justification for doing that, and most of this is done unconsciously. We don't do this unconsciously. The justifying feature is that we don't know how being human actually works. We don't know how improv works. We don't know how spirited, amazing, playful, wonderful, wondrous, enchanted improvisation and play. You can't tell whether you get a paycheck for that. You can't tell whether you get kissed or punched. You can't tell whether the house stays built up around you or falls apart. You can't make reliable predictions unless you're using a reliable role, right? And so what we tend to do is we pick one of these roles and we can switch roles, right? I can go from victim to rescuer to persecutor to judge to spectator to commentator to comedian, right? I can just keep going around these roles. Now the comedian is a weird role because the comedian kind of knows about this problem and is actually poking fun at it surreptitiously without calling it out directly, right? That's why the comedian's hilarious. But I just want you to see that if we're playing authentically, we can't tell whether we get the paycheck or the punch, the kiss, the liberation, or the death. We don't know. And so that doesn't have to amplify vigilance. It doesn't have to, but there's a lot of ambiguity there. We have to learn to play openly with novelty, which I would argue both the octopus and the human were doing together, moment to moment. They weren't playing victim, they weren't playing persecutor, they weren't necessarily playing rescuer. And there's something, so that brings me back. I just want to highlight that. I'm going to highlight one other thing. I mentioned my dear friend, brilliant actress and teacher in Europe, Josephine Larson, who I hope to interview very soon. Because it was when I was thinking about her that this next insight came to me. Actors do something really weird, which is they come to improvisatory life within a role that's entirely pre-structured. They almost show us the way out of the trap by coming to life, by bringing a dead role that's already every move in the role is written out and pre-structured. And yet by coming to life inside that, in a way, they show us the key to the cage. They become the key to the cage right in front of us by doing the opposite of what we would expect.
Okay. Coming to life within the role in a way that is still a trap. Um, okay, but there's something in that. I was thinking you might not want to talk about this. The toy maker.
Oh, we can talk about that.
I
And toy
know
maker might be a trap.
that's not what I mean.
Okay.
But I was getting this understanding earlier today for what that could be. I was getting the image that there is a history of roles within us that are asking to be played. However, the way that our consciousness immediately responds is with that hypervigilance and fear. And feels like it's improv, but it's actually not. The role is already there.
Oh yeah, that's not unreasonable. Um, we're just we're playing with what the word improv actually means here. But I'm with you so far. Let's go.
Um, that's basically as far as I got with it. However, the other thing that was kind of knocking at the edges of that was within those roles, those roles have relationships to other things in the world. Um, and then if we can embody that role, we start to be able to see those relationships forming in different ways.
Okay, so am I understanding you correctly when you say, if I say, for example, a truly good doctor who's all the way in and present with her patients is enacting the rescuer role, but she's not avoiding the liberation. It's not a trap, or
mm,
it's not as much of a trap. Maybe you're not saying that. Help me understand what you're trying to point at here.
what I'm what I'm trying to point at is those roles. There's roles that exist in me that I haven't played.
Mhm.
However, they're in me already. I just have to step into
Oh
them.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. I often think of these as I mean, there's things other than roles that are similar. I think, for example, that humans probably have, I don't know, 472.5 senses, but we usually don't develop them, partly because we're told we have five.
Right.
I mean, I can point out some other ones right quick. You can sense whether you're hungry or not. You can sense whether you're hot or cold. You can sense where you are. You can sense kind of if you're awake or not. You can sense whether something's alive or dead. You can sense whether somebody's being duplicitous or not. Uh, lots and lots of senses. But I don't just mean those. I mean the capacity to sense how to heal an injured being with your spirit, or how to touch another mind that isn't human, or how to remember before you were born, or how to remember after you're dead, or things like this. How to teleport, how to bilocate, things that we think of as impossible. Again, we've been told what you're supposed to be able to do, and what you're supposed to be able to do is it's like, in my view, and I know I say this over and over again, it's a shitty trope, but it's like this little part of the fingernail on the end of the pinky of my humanity. That's the part you're supposed to be able to do. Anything that you're not supposed to be able to do, you definitely aren't supposed to be able to have like a whole hand. You're not even really supposed to have a finger, and you better not have a wrist, because that just leads to crazy shit. Okay? There's something though that I'm sensitive to share the conversation space and hear your thoughts and insights and concerns as they arise. But I want to go back to the octopus very briefly. When I was a kid, I was probably about 4 or 5. I met a pregnant praying mantis, and we became very deeply bonded. I used to feed her bologna. She would eat bologna. Well, she was fat and pregnant, and sometimes some nights she would stay in my room, and some days I would put her out on the lemon plants, and she would hunt stuff out there. And one day she took a chunk out of my index finger and ate it just like it was a piece of bologna. And thankfully, I didn't fling her.
Right.
It hurt and it scared me, but I don't think I flung her. If I remember right, I don't necessarily trust my memory all that well, but I don't think I flung her. And I saw her lay her eggs. And I saw those eggs hatch. And I got to say, watching a praying mantis egg case hatch is one of the craziest, amazing things you can possibly do as a human being. But especially if those kids contain some of your own meat.
Right.
Okay, so this whole thing about separate identity and that when the mother dies, she's actually gone and that memory doesn't traverse generations and
Right.
all this kind of seething bullshit is straight up bald-faced lying. It's just bullshit. It's reductivist, mechanist nonsense that's very compelling in language and resembles certain kinds of understandings of mathematics. But the thing with which we forge mathematics and the thing with which we understand math and the thing with which we make the evaluative determinations is not captured within those systems. It is beyond those systems. I know that the children, memory is a crazy, spiritual, metaphysical, bizarre, astonishing thing that has nothing to do with mere records. And, you know, one of the things I was trying to say to a friend the other night, and I was being very emphatic about it, I was like, I said a few things. If it's okay, I'm going to run through them quickly. But if you've got some thoughts you want to share, I can pause. Okay, so these are crazy toys, but they're important. Imagine that a manifold is a mathematical construct with many bubbles and dimensions in it. And imagine that what we think of as physical separation and form are expressions of taking slices of this manifold. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine a child who has a praying mantis on his hand, and they're looking at each other. Now, what I want you to imagine is that in a dimensional space, just 2 steps above the one where they're separate in form looking at each other, those are the same organism. They're actually not metaphysically, those are the same thing, right? Just as if a part of myself appeared separate in time and space, but it's literally me, and I am literally it. Now imagine that all the forms of life on Earth are just peculiar slices of a single manifold, one thing. And that in a slightly higher dimensional space, those are the same being. They are the same one. So that's the first part of the toy. Now here's the second weirder part of the toy. And then there's a third part that's even crazier. Imagine that the Earth is a library of all of the forms of life on every living world in all of time.
I've had that experience come to me.
So that praying mantises are the dominant life form on another world, whales are the dominant life form on another world, whatever dominant means, octopuses, mice, and they all know it. They all know this, except the humans have forgotten it. So the animals come up and they look at you like, and the humans are like, yeah, what? You're a mouse. And I was like, no, we're the same thing. On my world, you're a tiny little thing that can't talk, right? On this world, I'm a tiny little thing that can't talk, but I know, you know, what's going on. It's as if you don't have to go anywhere to go everywhere.
Right.
Because what organisms are living planets, are connected to each other, and they emit the forms of the entire manifold of worlds on each world uniquely. And different sizes can mean different things. It could be that large animals live on planets near to us in time and space, Small ones live far away or in the future, who knows? I mean, there's different ways to think about it. You can play with it however you like. And I'm going to say the last thing briefly so that I don't have to go on forever here and become tediously didactic. Everything you see in nature is a mode of time space. The sun is a mode of time space. The moon is a mode of time space. The oak tree is a mode of time space. I am a mode of time space. The cloud is a mode of time space. The rainbow, the octopus, the mouse, the lion, the elephant. These are modes of time space. They are like the fingertips of a hand you cannot see. But trust me when I say the hand has a unifying body. These are one thing, right? And not in some wooish or metaphysical philosophy way. No, in a very direct way. These are the faces of the same one, right? Without religion.
Right.
They are the same one. And so when the octopus and the man come together, there's this gigantic hyperstructure of unity above them, and it's finding a way to improvise and negotiate the expression of that unity in their different temporalities, because the octopus lives for 6 months, the man lives for 70 years, right? She lives for this tiny little fragment of his lifespan. And so one of the things that's happening are that two temporalities are mating, right? Fruit flies live for like 13 hours, right? Tortoises live for 170 years. And you can get a fruit fly on a tortoise, right? And those two temporalities, okay, this is the last thing I'm going to say. Organisms are to time as stars are to light. Living planets are the most incredibly rich temporal situation you can possibly have in time space, because there's all these hyperstructures of organismal temporality. It's madly rich. If you go just like 300 miles above the surface of the Earth, events per second up there, 4. Come down to the Earth, events per second, trillions. Okay.
Unless you're talking about light.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, the temporalities that arise from the interaction of the physical substrates of time space are different in kind, I think, from those that arise in organisms. And the organisms are hyper complex. It's not an accident that you have 47 trillion cells, half of which are bacteria, and that the animal cells have each one of them 7 organelles, or 15 or something, or I can't remember the exact number. So, and then you're filled with viruses too, which are like 10 trillion of those per cell. So what's going on in you temporally? Like relationally, temporally, billions of trillions of bizarre, complex biorelational interactions per fucking thousandth of a second. Okay, that's me done being didactic for a moment. Thank you for putting up with that.
So here's the problem.
I can't wait.
You can explain that to me in a way that makes sense. How? This is what I want to explore. I'm not saying we can find this answer. I don't know. Maybe we've been looking for this answer for a long time.
Actually, a better toy would be really helpful, because what I just did was very didactic, but go ahead.
How? So I feel compelled to work on the issue of human separation. How do you get the humans to experience that in a way that they know that truth?
Yes, good question. So I'll begin with a prohibition. You don't just talk to them about it.
Right.
Like I just did. That's why I was complaining about being didactic, by the way, because I'm just talking about shit. So what you have to do with humans is you have to give them an activity that they do together for each other in
For
which,
each other.
yes, in
There's
which,
sorry,
no, go ahead.
that's something that's coming, that's been made clear to me recently, is that essence of the I'm doing this for you, not
Yeah,
in a
or
savior way,
right, yeah.
in a helping way. That could get mixed up with the savior thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the words, okay, one of the words we can use is cooperative.
Yes,
We are
yes.
cooperating.
Thank you.
Okay. And so we are merging our each of our unique skills, faculties, senses, abilities, urges, drives, motivations. We're merging those so that we get a higher level organizational body, which is sort of what I meant by the third mind, which I really think should be called the first mind.
A higher organizational third body.
A higher level organizational body with faculties that none of us could have alone, but that we naturally have together. And there's nothing easier than to show people how that works. And if they don't believe you and they want an argument, just point at a football team. Is
Right.
everybody the quarterback? No. Is everybody the linebacker? No. Who kicks the field goals? One guy, one woman, right? Why? Because what they do is they're forming a higher level organizational body out of unique specializations that each member has. And that's what nature does all day long. That's why you have different organs. If you open up your body, you don't just see one organ in there, and you don't see 9 copies of the same thing.
So, what I would like to play with is okay. I like trying to figure out how to play with people's consciousness. Um, and so this is something that I've been trying to work on of like, how can I get this? What what could I do to help activate this in people? Um, I don't know. I'm just at the very, very beginning phases of that.
I mean,
That's why
play and improv are very powerful um, ingredients, components. This is part of why I mentioned Josephine, because she gets people together to do. It's very scary to improvise, right? When you're not used to it. Once you get used to it, it's just fun. Well, it's not just fun, but it's fun. It's less frightening. Um, but what we can do is we can take one of the best things to do is to take a problem and improvise around the problem. And if the problem is, how do we get people to have a direct experience of their non-ordinary intelligences, memory, these things? That could actually be the problem that we put 5 people together to play with, right? We can use,
that's what you're doing.
yes, exactly, yes. So we can actually solve the problem with the method that we imagine is applicable.
Okay.
It's similar with dreaming, right? And also, another thing we could do is we could get people to seek insights together over a period of time as they dream separately. We could get people to play with meeting each other in dream space. We could even, and this would be very useful, by the way. Let's say we got 5 people, including the person who is the, what would we call them? The Hierophant, or the, not necessarily the teacher, but the catalyst, right? The person who's leading the other ones. So we probably can't, I mean, we might be able to, but let's presume that we can't actually get these 5 people to lay down and take a nap and dream together. Okay. So let's do something similar though. Let's get them to sit in a circle. Let's start out with a little bit of a statement of intent. Here's what we're here to do. This is why we're here, what we trust in. Our goal today is this beautiful thing that we're all exploring. And then have them imagine that they're having a dream right now, and have them imagine that each of the people in the circle is meeting them in the dream, and have them imagine that each of those people brings them a little piece of the answer to the puzzle, and then have them imagine that they integrate those pieces together, and then have them imagine that they wake up, and then have them talk about their experience. Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Yep.
So we may not be able to get them to just dream on command, but we can get them to play and imagine on command.
Yep. 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 That's beautiful.
And I didn't have this idea before just now. I'm improvising. I'm
Right.
doing the thing I was trying to talk about.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. Especially because I don't actually know. If I knew what the answer was, I would be there already.
I wish that were true because I often have the ability to see answers way before I can enact them. Way before.
That's interesting. I don't feel that way at all.
Hmm.
Uh, what I'm coming to terms with is I don't often have the right question.
Hmm.
Um, I remember in one conversation we had, you said that I was a seer.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'm being open more. I'm trying to be more open by acknowledging that that's not the first time I've heard that. Um, and I've had the inkling that all the information is right there. You just have to ask the question. I don't ask. If I do ask, the answer will come up. Um,
Hmm.
I just can't find the right question frequently. And there's something right now that's asking to be explored, that is, what questions arise when you bring this process to other people and see what happens in between. Also, totally separate, that to me, that mind is what I would call the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know, that just needed to be said.
I mean, that's one of the ways that I think about the identity of Toymaker.
Mm, mm-hmm.
That's just my little name,
Yeah,
my like a name you call your best friend or something, right? Like a
right,
nickname. Yeah, a nickname.
right. Um, that's kind of the image I was getting when I was listening to our last conversation, and I was imagining Toy Maker, and I felt like I started to understand what that was. And I was like, oh, I see that now. Okay, I get that. And I was getting the image of the library of identities we could inhabit that are not inhabited right now in this time space, but they could be inhabited. And there's information in them that can only be accessed
Mm.
if that identity is allowed to take over. And also,
Oh, yeah, yeah. I see.
that identity has different relationships
Mm-hmm.
uh, in time. And so, what I was seeing is that's what was trying to come in. There's something. And so, what I'm trying to say is there is something trying to come in that I don't have full access to right now, and I'm trying to figure out what the question is.
Mm.
Um, and it relates to, because once I know what the question is, okay. And I guess I could just ask, what is this? I am doing that. That is what I'm doing. That's part of my exploring.
As you might know, one of the Extinctionati meetings, and you'd be welcome to attend if you ever care to. Um, we discuss at length the problem of what, and how that's probably the most dangerous knife that humans use on their intelligence. And the reason that I say that is because, I mean, in Zen, there's a couple of, I mean, probably all the koans actually are just, um, I don't know. Actually, I'm going to say very clearly, I don't know what the koans are. But one could imagine that all the koans are actually just to get you to stop whatting. Just stop whatting. Um, one might imagine that if you had the intellectual solution to the koan of what is a mu, which is often the first koan people are given, the intellectual solution for that would be simply no longer make the gesture of reference in your consciousness. No more reference. Stop referring to things. Because probably like 99 point, 70,000 nines of your energy of awareness is being used to do something that is stupid and wrong. And if you were just, you don't even have to do what's right. Okay? You have to figure out what the right thing to do is. Just stop doing the stupid thing that's eating up 99 point, billions of nines percentage of your awareness. And what is it? Hilariously, what's the thing I'm supposed to stop doing? It's that thing.
Right.
What? It's the what thing. What is that? What am I supposed to do? What is the question again? What? Right? All of this whatting. And of course, there's 7 primary question words in English, which fascinatingly all begin with a doubling of yourself, right? The double you. You have to split yourself into 2. The one that's asking the question, and the one that's answering the question, to the one that's asking the question, the W. What,
Right.
when, where, why, how, who, which. But then there's one of the question, and by the way, all of them, their second letter is H, and that matters. There's something weird about that H letter. It's like breathing onto a mirror, and there's all these little dots that reflect each other, and they reflect you breathing onto them. And it's a very weird thing, this H letter, ha, ha. And then there's a vowel of some kind, right? O, A, I, where, E, right? Who, O, A, E, I, O, U, right? All the vowels are in there. You got W, and you got H, and you got some vowel, and then maybe another thing or not. But one of them just begins with H, and it's how. So it's important to notice this. That's one of my little homilies. It's something Toymaker taught me to pay very careful attention to. And when we become very concerned with what is going on, I am supposed to do, is the question, this what, it's not that we should never do it, but we might want to try a different approach. We might want to know, like, here's the thing. When Toymaker was with me, if I got super busy asking what or who are you, the vitality of the communion would degrade catastrophically instantly. And so I learned to notice that, and I realized, I mean, you can imagine a fairly mundane experience, say the experience of joyfully kissing and being kissed by someone you love, right? And imagine that your primary concern becomes what's going on here. How's that going to go? I mean, in sex, it would be even worse, right? It would be totally disastrous in sex to do that. So there's certain kinds of experiences that are so profound and intimate and astonishing and brilliant that what is happening or what I'm supposed to do or who is that or how did this happen? None of those things matter. In fact, the moment that we start to think about that, we fall off the the slack line, right?
Right.
Right, the slack line of ecstasis or insight or awareness or ecstasy or freedom that comes from being just very deeply engaged in the kiss, the taste of the food, the first rays of sunlight on my face in the morning, that little sound the animal made, and I don't even know what animal that was. These kinds of things. So, you know, keep these things in mind so that you don't get too obsessed with what's the question I'm supposed to be asking. That's a beautiful smile.
There's nothing more to say after that.
Sorry, I wasn't trying to put a cork in it.
I know, but that's it.
Hmm. I forget this all the time. This is the problem. I know crazy things, but unless I'm with somebody and we're sort of doing that thing together, I'm just like a regular zombie, bouncing my head off walls and smacking myself with a hammer or, drinking the whiskey.
I was gonna ask though, as you're saying all this, have you ever spent a long period of time in silence?
Depends on what you mean. Yeah, sure. Like a couple of times I did a Zenkai, which isn't, I mean, the Zenkais I did were very minor. It's not even a Vipassana retreat. It's like 3 days. One time 1 day and one time 3 days. Is that right? Two times 1 day and one time 3 days. And that was pretty intense, but I was a lot younger. And I try to sit each day, but it's only 25 minutes. It's not a long sit. So the basic answer is no.
Interesting. That's that's it. That's the answer. And I don't mean silence as in like a retreat.
Mm,
Uh, I mean that silence,
stillness.
that inner, yeah, where that other thing is communicating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that's part of what's going, not necessarily the whole thing, but it's part of what happens when we sleep, right? The the Hindu tradition breaks up the AUM, right, into what is it? Waking, dreaming, and deep dreamless sleep, if I've got that correct. And so in deep dreamless sleep, there's that kind of stillness. But while I'm awake, no, I'm not.
Except when you were with Toymaker.
Well, that was such a weird thing. I mean, that was weird as hell. I'm not sure it was silent. I'm not sure there was stillness. Maybe. Maybe. I don't know though. I don't know. I really don't. That thing's still mysterious to me. Though I have various stories about it. I can make up stories for fun about what it was or wasn't or yeah.
There is there is, I would suspect, a place that you could go that is that. Um, and it is made of that silence. And it's certainly not stillness. Um, but it's funny to me because I do know that. I do know that is the point. So when I ask what, it's shut up and just be with that, and the rest happens. Um, and when I am in that place, that's where I know that's what that is. I don't,
Yeah.
um, and it's just being brave enough to walk forward in that place as often as one can.
Hmm. Yeah, to garden there, to water the plants of it, to be the sunlight on their leaves, maybe. Hmm. It's funny, often in dreaming, I have a situation where this happened to me this morning. I come across pets that I have neglected. I forgot that I had a cage full of praying mantises in one of my rooms. They probably haven't been fed in years. Surely they are dead by now. And yet I go there and they're not quite dead yet. And they need some food. This morning it was a parrot that I used to have whose name was Nike. And I realized, like, God, I haven't given him food or water in days. How is he still alive? I got to get him. Will he even drink the water? Can I get him to eat some nuts? I mean, and I don't know what's going on there, but I think these are aspects of my soul, right, that are just starving
Yes.
in the waking world, right? They're just being totally deprived, and they need a little bit of love and some attention and some nourishment.
Yes. Although the book I'm reading right now, um, the main character is dying and she's being walked into dead realm, and she was instructed before she went there that one of the worst things you can do for the living is to hang around, um, and not be allowed to die. And so I had a cat. Second time I thought about him today. Just the best cat, my best little friend. And he died. Um, and the next 3 nights consecutively, I had, this is kind of gory, but it is what it is.
It's
Sorry, it
fine.
is. It is. Um,
It's
I
fine.
had I had dreams of his body rotting and decaying and slowly being eaten, and that was it. Like, and I thought it was, or no, I was just thinking about that. So that part, to me, that's his energy. I was being freed of that energy,
Hmm.
that memory. So when I come home, my body doesn't expect him to come running anymore because he's been
Digested.
digested. Yep. And so that's what I'm discovering with my dreaming recently. Um, like when I told you I worked at that retreat center for a little while, and the facilitators there would always be teaching like, oh, everyone's dreams are a reflection of parts of themselves. And I'm really just beginning to doubt that more and more with my experiences. Like I really don't, um it's very, very clear to me now that actually a lot of things in my dreams are not me. It's not,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So it might not be parts of your psyche.
Well, it's complicated because once again, this is the what question. What are those things in your dream, right? And what when we ask what, we don't actually necessarily get the answer of what the thing is or what's going on. What the answer we get is what was our orienting concern when we asked. Because our orienting concern when we ask, the purpose that drove us to ask, will produce the type of the result, the
Your intent.
species of the result. Say again?
That what you would consider your intent?
No, we were using intent in a different way. It's what I would consider your purpose, your goal. Because if you want, okay, imagine that you meet someone new, right? And maybe either you're kind of annoyed by them or you're sort of enchanted by them. Either way, it'll work, right? So if you find them annoying, you're going to be looking for reasons to become more annoyed every time they say anything. So that's going to be your purpose in evaluating their speech behavior, even though you're probably not aware of that purpose. You're not aware that you're judging them because you're annoyed. And similarly, if you are attracted to them, everything they say is going to become more enchanting. You're like, oh, I knew this person was very special.
Right.
Right? So your purpose determines the kind of the result of your questions. It determines like whether you have a kitty cat as a baby or a dolphin or a blue jay, so to speak. I mean, those are kind of ridiculous because they're not animals, but purpose we think when we think or when we speak or when we evaluate that we're figuring out what stuff is. And what's actually true, which is weirdly like the supposition about the dream. Okay, that supposition about the dream, that everything you see is part of your psyche, isn't true about the dream. It's true about the purpose of the person who said that.
Right. You are correct.
The purpose of them. And they're projecting their purpose onto the dream. And I would argue that they're doing that somewhat like they're doing that unconsciously and confusedly. And also, they're not wrong. It's
Right.
not wrong, but it's wildly incompletely true.
Right. I think most people have been taught that that's
They have. Yes, that's a very common bullshitty, one valued lens to use to look at dreaming. And one of the main problems humans have after what is they have one valued thinking. Oh, that's a this. That's just a this. Dreaming is just your psyche doing da 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 da, right? Just this one thing, one valued thinking. There's nothing in the universe that is one valued except human thinking about things. It doesn't resemble anything in nature. Nothing in nature is single valued.
I know, and of course, immediately I want to ask why, and then I'm like, no.
Oh well, no, it's okay. You can ask why. The why is thinking you know reduces vigilance and ambiguity, which makes predictions much easier. That's one way of answering the question. It's not the only way. Pretending that you don't have to be vigilant anymore. The ambiguity is gone. You'll stop asking what's going on and what that is and what's next.
We are the AI.
No, language is the AI.
No.
We're the thing it runs in.
I'm crossing my legs. It takes a lot of effort.
I got mine crossed too at the moment, and it's dangerous for me because I could be injured that way, but
I could too.
I'm making a joke.
Not yet. Okay. Got it. Yeah, I'm kind of laughing and realizing like we're the AI because I'm watching my mind. Well, one, the mind is having the conversation, but two, I'm watching it try. It's caught in a loop of trying to figure itself out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and immediately, once again, why? Why am I like that? Why am I like that? Not why am I like that? Why are we all like that? And it's almost like this entity has it's coming out of us, and it's becoming its own being.
The aspect of cognition that wants manipulables. It wants to grasp and manipulate a tool. That aspect is the cause of most of our confusion and a lot of our trouble. And the rest of the problem is this. This is the rest of the problem. No, I'm kidding. I'm just making a joke, actually. This is Jacques Lacan's graph of desire. It's a very sophisticated intellectual toy of the interiority of humans. It's one of the weirdest toys I've ever come across. It's got all these little features. This is the barred subject, and what bars the subject is language. It's got all these crazy little features. There's a few people who can explicate this well. It's not my goal to do that here. I was actually just holding it up as a kind of cartoon.
Humans.
Weird. Yeah. It's mostly, I think, actually the main problem with us is language.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say it really simply. Alfred Korzybski said this. The is of identity is false. It's one of the simplest ways to encompass almost the entire problem. Whatever this is, it cannot be a finger.
Right.
A finger is a token used to point at this. This is an infinitely valued thing with infinite characteristics. So to pretend that we're not excerpting is what fucks us up. And we do that because it reduces vigilance and ambiguity. And then we think we can make good predictions. Not really true. It's true in very simple senses. If I put the pot with the water on the stove and I turn the stove on, right? There's a little bit of ambiguity there, but that water's going to boil. That prediction's probably going to come true.
How have you ever sat intentionally with ambiguity?
Yeah. Which of us hasn't been sick or injured?
What was that?
Which of us has not been sick or injured? Which of us has not been in love? I mean, hatred's kind of similar too. Which of us hasn't been frightened or terrified of something? Those
Maybe
are all. Maybe you mean something different.
Yeah. Because the what I've noticed. Okay, have you ever been in an experience where everything was truly unknown to you? Like we have a set of patterns we follow every day, and when that gets broken.
I mean, yeah, at least briefly, but certainly the experience that I refer to as Toymaker was wow, unimaginable prior to the experience, and unimaginable within the experience, and unimaginable after the experience. But I would argue that being in love is kind of similar, especially the early phases of that we often refer to as limerence. Some people recall limerence. The high enchantment in the beginning that can happen. That stuff's pretty crazy. And then the other thing would be anytime there was an accident. Like a car accident I was in when I was 12 was pretty nuts. We flipped a Honda Civic two-door coupe 7 times kitty corner at 75 miles an hour. That was, I'm sure we were dead. But also even a simple accident like Um, Once I was playing pool with my son and I was drinking whiskey and I went to set the glass down on the little card table and I missed and it shattered. That moment of it shattering was, sorry, was weird. But maybe you mean something different than those. How about you? Have you been?
I try to catch as many patterns as I can and unwind them,
Mm.
which is not, it's not reasonable all the time. It's just not.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know what you're doing. You're not supposed to do that, Amber.
but when you do that, what I've noticed is the pattern finding mind really activates
Mm.
excessively.
Mm.
Um, on the other side of that, it really begins trying to find an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also the quality of the feeling that comes if you can be in that place intentionally is interesting to me. And that's why I asked
Mm.
if you get past the hypervigilance mind.
I mean, I this may not be what you're trying to point at, but it does occur to me that sitting zazen is a little bit like that, and also doing tai chi is a little bit like that
Yeah.
because you're familiar with the form of the behavior, but inside that form, you're exploring.
Yeah.
Um, but again, I would say that, like, I mean, it's been a long, long time since anybody kissed me, but a kiss is kind of a similar thing.
I would I would argue against that a little bit.
I'd love to hear your argument against it.
Only because we have such a programmed behavioral response to that.
Okay, let me back up. When I was 13, I met a girl named Gigi. She was 18. She was kind of a tomboy. And I met her on a baseball diamond and she was pitching baseballs to boys who were hitting balls. And I had just seen the Bad News Bears, in which Tatum O'Neal plays like a sort of a kick-ass tomboy, right? And so I took Gigi back to my mom's house, my mom's apartment nearby, and we started kissing. I had never been kissed that way before. I had never had a girl's tongue in my mouth, for example, and that was pretty fucking weird. And about as compelling as it could possibly be, while at the same time being sort of disgusting. Um, and I think we had like a single kiss that probably lasted more than an hour. And we just kissed for forever. And I don't even understand what the hell happened. It was like going to another universe. Now, later after that, then I started to understand that there's sort of a form to this thing. And here's
Right.
kind of how it goes. And you can do some other things while you're kissing and, all those other things. But the first time, it was like going to fucking outer space. And I mean, I could say even more crazy things. So, literally, the first, I don't know if I should share this, it's kind of personal. I'll just say, like, the first time that I did that thing that humans sometimes do together, I lost consciousness immediately as the process began, and I did not regain consciousness until it was over. I went to a place that was fully darkness, and there were just these shining colored lights in that place,
Yeah.
and there was no Darren, there was no anything. And for the entire span of the event, I was checked out for whatever reason. I have no idea. I've never heard another person say that. I believe other people have had a similar experience, but I've never heard someone describe it that way. I had no idea what took place for that span of time. None. No recollection of it. Just flashing colored lights.
I've had a similar experience.
Oh, really?
Not completely disappearing, no, but
Hmm.
the lights
Hmm.
with me still being embodied.
Hmm.
Um, but I would categorize all of those experiences as um I feel like there's a massive part of our mind that knows where it's going.
Hang on just a moment.
Okay.
I'll be right back. I think someone's. Are we? Is there a time? Okay. Cool. Um, refresh the topic since I just got distracted.
So what I'm pointing to is how the mind behaves when it's knocked out of its um hmm what did you call it? You said hypervigilance.
Oh, vigilance, ambiguity, prediction.
Right. When its ability to make predictions is taken away.
Right. And so that's why I mentioned an accident.
Yes. I think that's one of the closest um to be honest, the only time I've really fully experienced that kind of state of mind is after some sort of accident. Um,
Um, oh God. I would suggest that humor makes use of setting you up in a sort of predictive loop and then shattering it,
yes, good
right?
humor.
Yes, good comedy is like this. Um,
Mm, that also explains. I had an experience earlier today. Um, so today was pool therapy, and the therapist was asking if I've ever been in a sensory deprivation tank.
oh,
And I said,
right.
yes. And he was like, well, what was your immediate response? And I was like, to laugh. And he kind of didn't understand. And I was like, I don't know. Anytime my consciousness is really surprised, like doesn't know what to do with it, that's my first reaction. Well, the therapist that was helping us today, there's always two people in the pool with me. Um, he's an intern, so he doesn't have a lot of experience yet with people in my situation.
Mm.
And they had me with my legs like in a horizontal position, trying to push myself off of the wall. And his expectation is that I'm not going to be able to do that, which is understandable. Um, and he felt me start pushing, and his immediate response was to laugh. And the other therapist didn't get why he was laughing. And I was like, oh no, I totally understand why he's laughing because he didn't expect that at all. So wonderful. I'm glad you said that because that's kind of what I was trying to point to is for some reason when that pattern seeking gets broken, once the initial shock resides, there's just an immense amount of joy.
Yeah, it might be that liberation is actually liberation from expectation, prediction,
Right.
vigilance,
Right.
right? Like real liberty means you're just no longer engaged in that bullshit
Right.
anymore.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
that's what being authentic actually means or something, right?
Right.
You've dropped your structured game.
Right. Right. But it's our mind. It's not I mean, so it's finding loopholes to like, how do I get out of that thing?
Hmm.
Anyways, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to point.
Often, when people are trying to not do something, I think they're making they're having some confusion because it seems to me, and maybe this is one of my pattern fucking beliefs. I don't know. Come on, Darren. Um, do something else instead. Do something that is better. Just do a thing. And this is the other thing that I really want to emphasize is if you want to change the world or you want to give people an experience of something amazing that they themselves are or can become, you have to get them doing something. Don't talk to them about it. Give them a way to play together in that direction, and that will work because when they get a taste of the actual experience, then they will know and they'll start to be like, okay, I'm not going back to that other shitty thing I was doing. Those people eating rocks, these people eating peaches. I get that they're religious about eating rocks and they might punish me if I, show them a peach or whatever, but these people over here eat peaches. I'm going with
Right.
them, you know. Um, and so yeah, I think that those are important things to remember.
Trying to be brave and not fill that gap.
Mm, me too.
That's all I've got.
Once I start making face noises, there's no end to it.
All I've got is a big sun. That's it.
Beautiful. So grateful every time we get to play together and try to see and remember. And for whatever brought us together, I'm super happy. I'm always here if you want to just talk or explore or yell at me, whatever, whatever you got.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Amber.
All right. We'll talk soon.
I look forward to that. All blessings to you, dear heart.
Good night.
Night.